All right. So I have Brian Krogsgard with me. Brian runs Post Status, which delivers news and information about the WordPress industry and has a membership club component with a private Slack group that I'm a part of. It's a great group. And I think it's close to 1,000 members at this point. And he's also a host of the Draft podcast. So he's all over the place and an influencer among influencers. So I'm really happy and grateful that he could join me today. And thanks, Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I appreciate you having me, and I guess thinking of me in that role. Really, I'm just very similar to everyone else in the space, but I kind of overshare what I'm thinking about and working on.
Yeah,
that's probably the impetus for how most people become, I guess, thought of within a space, as they just talk about what they're thinking about.
Yeah, so talk about that oversharing. What is Post Status for those of us who haven't heard of it?
Sure. I mean, well, really, Post Status was just a way to take all the things I'm thinking about in terms of WordPress, how I use it, how WordPress fits in the ecosystem. You know, all those things you kind of dig into as you really get into a project. Mm-hmm. Post Status was just me taking that and formalizing it into a blog initially, and really it was just a link blog at first because I wasn't sure I would be able to do like long form stuff, and then it really pretty quickly made me realize I'm going to need to spread my wings a bit here. And anyway, eventually I turned it from a mix of short form and long form content that was free to the public into a paid trade magazine of sorts, is kind of what I call it, where the majority of the content is private only to members. And like you said, it's up to about 1,000 people now. And I think maybe 250 of those were in pretty short order. So like in those first couple months, to help kind of show me whether it was possible. Mm-hmm. And I think around 1,000 is kind of a sweet spot of like, it's not so many people that the conversations are lively, but not like a constant stream.
Right.
Of course, I'd like more members, but I don't know how it would affect like the chat side of things. But also just in the sense of how it feels like a community. But anyway, so I turned it into a paid thing, and then now I get to ponder about the ecosystem for a living.
Nice. So you said it started as like basically a link sharing blog where you'd go around and you'd see like what people are writing about in the WordPress community, what are some interesting articles that you can share, and then you figured out that you needed to spread your wings a little bit more, as you said. What was telling you that you needed to change your strategy at that point?
Sure. I mean, well, I was blogging about WordPress for years before I created Post Status. And when I created Post Status, I wasn't sure I would have like the time and energy to do regular full-length blog posts, you know, like 300 to 600 words or whatever, maybe more sometimes. And I had been blogging on WP Candy. That's actually where I started blogging about WordPress stuff. But really, I just discovered I needed more of an outlet to get my own words out. But I also thought that there was value in curation of things other people were putting together. And it took me a while to realize this. I'm definitely more cemented in this idea now, is that the ability to curate both from a sense of people, like who you're gathering from to filter noise and signal, but also like what you gather from them and determining what's important and what's relevant. That really is a skill, and it's something I've discovered. I'm fairly capable of diving into a community, and even if I don't know a ton, being able to, within a reasonable time frame, get a lay of the land and kind of understand what's going on, and maybe even get my foot in the door. And with WordPress, I really was able to do that over the course of a couple of years, and eventually enough to where I had the trust of the community to start a paid thing for it. And that's kind of what got me where I am now.
Yeah. So I want to dig in a little bit more about why you started Post Status. So you say that you wanted to just share your thoughts, and I'm sure that was part of the reason. But from the beginning, were you thinking like this could turn into something? I want to build this into a community eventually. Did you have like the full trajectory of Post Status in your head first, or was it more just
No, definitely not. I wanted to learn what I needed to be able to kind of go initially just build websites, but I realized relatively quickly that there was more to it than that, and there might be an avenue for me to make a living as a developer somewhere, or, something like that, using WordPress as a tool. And I just had a desire to blog about what I was learning and kind of share what I was learning as I went along, and in more depth than what you see on Twitter. A lot of people do what I do, but they do it on social media. Mm-hmm. And what I do is to try to formalize those thoughts some and not let them get lost out in the ether of social media. Like finding past tweets or whatever is pretty tough unless you're searching very specifically for that. And I like to be able to create an archive of kind of where we're at. So I just kind of had that desire to blog about what's happening, to share what I'm learning. It's like having a dinner conversation with your friends, and it's like, hey, what's going on? What are you thinking about these days?
Right.
But doing that with a wider audience. I mean, it's kind of the essence of what blogging is, and I've been drawn to that, and I really was just doing it to share what I was learning, and over time realized there weren't a whole lot of people doing that.
Right.
And then I was able to monetize that, which was pretty original at the time in terms of monetizing with paid content and not, via traditional ads, or more likely like affiliate revenue and that kind of stuff.
Right. So then what did it look like when you're blogging, you're sharing this content? What did it look like when you started realizing, okay, this is actually a community? I'm starting to I'm starting to get entrenched in this community. I'm starting to be a voice, and it feels like I can actually start a paid membership community, and it won't just be, an empty Slack group.
Well, I never charged anyone for anything that I was putting out there other than client work, of course. But like in terms of community oriented stuff, I never charged anyone for anything from 2010 until January 2015 was roughly the time frame for me being involved in the community. So you can say I paid my dues for several years to gain trust. And that's really pivotal if you want to do something, is to pay your dues, gain trust. And for depending on the industry and what you're looking at, it may not take 5 years, or I could have done it 3 years earlier. But I spent several years in my industry actually doing work, as a developer at an agency, and that was my job. And Post Status was a hobby and thing I did on the side, or nights or weekends or whatever. And I realized over time, especially into working with the second agency that I was with, I was really managing a whole lot of stuff there. And something had to give. I was working too many hours within the agency to put the hours in with Post Status. And I just thought about it and knew that I just didn't want to give up Post Status. If I had to give something up, I'd rather give up the agency, because I could go back and find another agency to work for someday, or go back to them. There's a standing offer. The range was fantastic for me. So I just decided to take a risk and just go for it. And fortunately, I had some people. I always credit Tom Wilmot from Human Made. Whenever I wrote a blog post one time on my personal blog, just talking about how the heck am I going to do this, and is it feasible? And I've kind of brainstormed some ideas publicly, basically, to see what kind of feedback I might get. And Tom Wilmot said he would sign every employee at Human Made up for Post Status membership.
Nice.
And I was like, wow, that's awesome. That's like 25 people or something. And Human Made offers that to this day. Like when you onboard at Human Made, one of the pages for your onboarding is, do you want a Post Status membership? Here's the coupon code to go get it. Yeah. So getting support from the big agencies, Human Made, 10up, Web Dev Studios, and some others all do that. They offer that to their employees, and that's a huge help.
Did you have the conversation with Tom before you announced the paid Post Status membership? Like, was that okay?
Just
in that I have 25 members or whatever.
No, just in that brainstorming blog post, but also when I saw Tom and other folks at events and stuff, they were all in support of me doing something like that. And then I also, now I had already decided I was going to go full time on it, and I gave myself about a month to figure out what I was going to do. But the way I figured I would float the whole thing would be to get some corporate partners up front. Mm-hmm. So like I limited it to it's a lot, but like 12, I have 12 corporate partners and asked each of them to pay for the whole year. Mm-hmm. And it's roughly a WordCamp sponsorship is what I was asking for, a kind of equivalence. Mm-hmm. The first year I charged $2,500 per partner. So that was $30,000 from those 12 partners that I think I had 2 that were really small businesses that said they couldn't do it. But for the most part, everyone that I asked was on board to give it a shot and to support what I was doing, because it was independent news creation in our community, and that was considered valuable.
And that was in 2015, so 2 years after you launched.
That was before. That was 2 years after I launched the website, before I launched the paid version. So essentially, they front loaded, several months worth of salary to pay me in order to see if this thing would work with members. Yeah. And then, so if nothing else, I could do it for full time for a few months, and if no one joined, it would sustain me for those few months, and then I could go back to part time, and then just have those partners and whatever. Fortunately, I had enough people sign up to where I realized pretty quickly that a full or even a part time thing wasn't necessary. Like it was going to be a full time position, and here we are 3 years later.
Yeah. So I want to go back a little bit further, because we kind of like jumped in when you already had these relationships that you could reach out and be like, oh, okay, I have this
so how to build community
corporate partnership. Yeah. So how did you get into that position? Were you like in communication with all these companies before? Did they just know of you because you had been blogging about them and sharing their content? I mean, what was it like building the relationship up to the point where you didn't feel ridiculous being like, hey, give me $2,500 for this, and you could be a corporate sponsor of Post Status?
By that point, I had gotten to know people beyond Twitter and beyond blog posts, and I was already talking to people at the time. Slack didn't even exist, so it was more, like maybe if you become good enough friends with someone through like Twitter or seeing them at events, you would have them as a Skype contact or something. Mm-hmm. Now it's a lot easier. If you're in the WordPress world, you could always talk to people in Post Status Slack, because that's become one of the good features of it. But like I would just develop a more in-depth relationship, and most of the time it's like, so you consider someone a friend because maybe one night you decided to move a conversation from Twitter to Skype, and you'd like talk to this one person for like an hour or an hour and a half, and just kind of get to know them a little better. And then you see them at a WordCamp, and you kind of cement that relationship because you meet them in person, you chat with them in the hallway, or you have a beer with them or whatever. And you do that several hundred times, and over time that has an effect. The other thing I would say from a social media perspective, because that's really where a lot of this starts in a remote centric industry, is you just give people feedback if they share something. So like if a company launches something, tell them congratulations, or give them feedback, or give the product a shot and give them feedback on what you think about it. Like, how is this plugin workflow? Or like, can you offer anything constructive in return, whether that's words of encouragement or something much more technical or official or whatever. And I did a lot of that. And when I was writing about things, like if, the Perel brothers who ran Obox as a good example, like kind of old school theme guys, I might write about like one of their themes, and, I'm still friends with those guys today. So, and it just all started for me talking about what they were working on, and showing interest in someone else makes them feel really good. Like that is a sure way to make friends, is to show interest in what someone else is doing rather than just constantly talking about what you're doing. Yeah.
So you said that a lot of these relationships would start on social media. So you're just like, retweeting and direct tweeting at people?
Yeah, I think just most often, just reply to somebody in a nice way, whether it's about something that they put out there or if it's just goofy and conversational,
Yeah.
But not spamming them at the same time.
Did you, yeah. Did you have like a system for it? Were you consciously being like, okay, first I'll reach out to them on Twitter, then like we'll see what happens then?
No, definitely not. It's stuff like this, I think, is really organic. And, now I really embrace this concept of being curious. Like I'm always curious. Mm-hmm. So if you're curious about something, I think if you go into the WordPress community or any community and you're just saying like, how am I going to exploit this? And how am I going to find my way in here and create a wedge and a market? And here I am. And now I'm a millionaire. You're not going to do very well. But if you go into something and you're curious about how it works and you're curious about who's involved, who's making decisions, what are the dynamics of this community, and you start edging in slowly and admitting your noobness, I guess, like mm-hmm. you're not like, you're brand new and there's this whole community out there and you're just trying to figure it out and navigate it. So navigate it, but don't like try to be a big ship in the harbor right away.
Right.
Let yourself kind of learn and adapt to it. And then as you see skills you can bring to the table, don't be afraid to share those, because mm-hmm. I think that's what a lot of people don't do, is they just don't share what they bring to the table. And I don't think you should be afraid to do that.
Yeah. So let's go back to writing content. So when you were writing content, well, first you were sharing links. So at what point is that not entirely accurate?
With post status.
Right.
I didn't start sharing sharing links on Twitter forever. Yes. And then in terms of website stuff, I blogged on WP Candy more in depth. But then when I started post status, initially it was link sharing, and then quickly turned into link sharing plus blog posts.
Do you think that your profile on WP Candy helped you launch post status, or was it?
Yes, with some people, but not necessarily. A lot of people never knew I was ever did anything with WP Candy, mm-hmm. but I wrote like 100 blog posts on WP Candy.
Yeah.
But a lot of people never knew that. A lot of people just found out, oh, this post status thing launched. But it certainly helped between writing on WP Candy, but also just relationships I'd formed outside of that. In-person stuff probably helped as much as anything, though.
Yeah.
And then just consistency, like throwing up a blog post once a week or whatever. That plays a part. And not like pontificating every single time. And that's something I struggle with today with the paid version of Post-status. I almost feel like I have to pontificate. Like you have to bring heat and action, and that can be paralyzing in a way if you don't necessarily have a lot of like big analysis for it. Like sometimes you don't have to do that. Like you can just share like this occurred,
right.
And there's lots of people that are just looking for people that will share like this is what occurred and pay attention to it, but I don't need to provide a whole lot more than that. And that's why now my content tends to be pretty short sometimes. Like I can do analysis in 2 sentences sometimes. It doesn't need 1,000 words mm-hmm. for every plugin launch or whatever.
Right. And so what are you looking for when you go out and get this content? What's the criteria that you're using to either share this or you do a quick write-up of it? I mean, what
I think
gets something on your radar?
Yeah, I get asked this a lot because people want me to share stuff. For me, it tends to be, is this different? Or is this the 100th or 1,000th time that the same thing has happened? And I hate to say that, but like a great example I can use without offending anybody at this point is like, if you launch a new theme and it's a ThemeForest theme or on your own shop, I don't really care which. If you just launch a new WordPress theme, it's going to have to be pretty interesting for me to care at all. Right. Because for the most part, like themes are not innovating. So if you want to show me something with a theme, it better have something pretty innovative if you really want it to be shared. That doesn't mean it's not a marketable product. You can sell it, you can do things with it, but like, why do I need to share this with other people. Like, it's something that's well known in our space. We've been doing this since 2007 with WordPress themes, and not a lot like brand new fancy stuff has happened with WordPress themes since maybe 2013, 2014, something like that. So for me, it needs to be something a little different. So like, if you're doing something interesting in a SaaS market or like a certain type of plugin market, a lot of plugins are not as interesting as they once were either.
Right.
Like a lot of them, I think they should be great. There's not enough of them actually, but like say, oh, I created a plugin. It's basically a custom post type with the custom taxonomy and some meta fields, and like here's this new type of listing thing that you can create.
Right.
Okay, good. Like I don't need to necessarily share every detail of that. Right. So, but if you're doing something interesting, then I want to share that for sure. So my job is to try to decipher what's another thing like a lot of other things versus what's something new and interesting.
Gotcha. And so do people, how many people reach out to you to try and get you to share something on a...
Oh, definitely every day. Absolutely.
And are you like looking through all of these, or sometimes are you just like, okay, this is another theme, so unless you have
I don't really get
pitch.
a lot of theme. I don't really get a lot of theme pitches these days. But I can tell typically from an email, because my contact form's open. I can tell from an email most of the time whether something is innovative or new or interesting. It's not that hard to decipher.
Right.
And I don't try as many of the new. I'm definitely missing things. You know, I'm over exaggerating this example a little bit, but like I'm certainly missing things that are interesting, could make interesting business models. Something that could be interesting is something that's boring. Like that's actually interesting. Like here's something that's boring, but it solves a problem. So like, here's my boring thing, but look, I just made 6 figures selling this plugin last year, and it's 10% of my business. That's interesting.
Right.
It could be a boring product. It doesn't have to be like the latest JavaScript framework or something that powers your product. Making something boring that is profitable and doesn't take a ton of time is very interesting. Like, who doesn't want to get in on that? But if it's just like, like just not really ticking any of the boxes, then I'm probably just going to move on.
Yeah.
Because people pay me to filter a lot of that stuff.
Right. So one thing that I struggle with is I'll write a 2,000, 3,000 word blog post. I'll spend weeks, maybe even a month writing this post. I think that it's the best post. It brings a ton of value. It goes beyond similar posts. But then what? Like the process of promoting that post always seems like you're asking for a favor, but it's hard. Like you can link to someone else's content and be like, hey, I linked to you in this blog post. I would love your opinion of the blog post, and if you like it, maybe you can share it or that kind of stuff. But no matter how you approach that, it always seems self-promotional. Is there like a strategy that you've seen? Like you still share a lot of content in your roundup. What gets this content on your radar and makes you want to share it, and do you think that applies to other blogs, or is it just like a specifically Post Status because of the way Post Status is run, like because you're a content sharing platform?
Let's just take the example of you wrote something. So Sam, you wrote something and you think it's great. Okay. The best way to get that to someone that you want to see it. So like when I write, sometimes I feel like I'm writing to an individual, I'll use Nason as an example, because for years, like Andrew Nason, he's one of the lead developers of WordPress. He's like kind of a figurehead of sorts for the core developer. Like this is the guy making WordPress core decisions. Of course, he's not the only one, but you could write a post about WordPress core and think like, if I'm writing this to Andrew Nason, who like maybe the most important person, I guess, to core WordPress development, and I'm writing about core WordPress development, what would I say and how would I say it? Mm-hmm. And when I'm done, what kind of feedback could I anticipate from them before getting it? Like, what will Nason say without actually him seeing this yet?
Right.
And I found that to be a good editorial tool, because I might cut out some stuff or like adjust the way I say something, because like maybe it's obvious feedback that I would get from him. Mm-hmm. And I think defining your audience in that way, and like it's almost like I wrote a letter to Andrew Nason. I'm glad I'm using him as my example because he won't make fun of me too bad. So I'm writing a letter to Andrew Nason, and I'm letting other people read it almost. And everyone else doesn't have, like, I don't have to apply it globally for every single person.
Right.
So, and I think that's sometimes when you make that mistake, and I've done this many times, is you end up like trying to define every aspect of this letter for all the other people, rather than letting them read your letter to the specific audience. And if they have questions or follow up, or like don't understand something, or who knows what, like they need extra context, then they can look that up, or they can ask you in the comments. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times that's been beneficial for me.
Huh. That's a pretty interesting way of looking at it, like a letter to one person or a few people. So then after you write that letter, obviously you're reaching out to that person, or are you just... Take this example. I might let it stew out there for a little while, but if I'm annoyed, like if something's very specific, let's say, I'll go back to let's use a company. So let's say Yoast. Let's say I write something about Yoast SEO, okay? Mm-hmm. And if it's been out there for like a day or so, and I've shared it on my own social network or whatever, and said, hey, I wrote this thing about Yoast, and you definitely put their name in there. If they didn't know it's coming, definitely at least put their name in like what you wrote about, because people want to see what they wrote about, right? or what's written about them. But like, let's say I'm really itching for like a response from Yoast Devok specifically, like about, or someone else at Yoast, about like what I wrote, some kind of feedback I wrote about their plugin. If I don't get that, and it's been like a day or so, and I know I tagged them, so hopefully they saw it. Maybe it's getting a little bit of traction, maybe it's not, but I really want to get something specific. Maybe then after a day or so, maybe I would do another like tweet, or like shoot them a brief email and say, hey Yoast, I'm curious what you think about this post, and maybe even specify something like specifically this feedback I gave about the way the Google snippet editor works, something like that. And I think a lot of times something like that can have the effect that you want. Gotcha. Other times it could be like, Yoast is like this big important guy, is like a SEO. I don't want to bother him, but maybe someone else that is paying attention to you, maybe they can get Yoast's attention for you. So like you just kind of try to work your way up that ladder of the food chain, I guess, in terms of having someone's attention. Mm-hmm. And slowly, as you put out more good content, whether that's thoughts on social media or blog posts or whatever, as you like develop your expertise, you'll gain the attention of bigger and bigger fish. Yeah. And with the ultimate goal of like having the attention of the biggest fish. That's what you want. If you're looking to be an influencer in a space, like you're looking to get the attention of the biggest fish, because you're coming from a point of view of saying like, I feel like I have something to add here, else you wouldn't be sharing it. Right. Well, I think that's a great way of thinking about it, and that actually kind of that's completely reorienting how I'm approaching this. So I really appreciate that little tidbit there. You also, we were talking a little bit before we started recording. You said that you're starting the whole process again of building a community in a completely new market where you have no name ID, and you said you're kind of targeting the cryptocurrency market. So tell us a little bit about how it's been to start all over.
Sure. And of course, this is not like 100% confirmed or anything, but I've wanted a second leg or multiple legs of my business for a while, because I think that there's good, sound business fundamental reasons to do that. And assuming I can run post status well and do something else, then that would be nice. So it's experimental, but yes, I've been looking. I looked at e-commerce, and actually, one of the reasons I abandoned that is, one, I'm not a perfect fit for being that person. I talked to a friend that does run a community in the e-commerce space. He runs it specifically for store owners. That's e-commerce fuel. He actually spoke at my event this August. So Andrew is in that space, and I went to him and some other people and was like trying to get their feedback on it. And I just realized that for me, that wasn't going to be the place where I could find a foot in the door, because like you have these people and they're in all these different industries. And really my expertise wasn't going to be about how to run their store. My expertise maybe would have been like platform centric, and it wasn't feeling like the best fit, even though I felt like I had things to add. So I actually, in the end, I decided in that case, I'd rather just write my e-commerce stuff that I want to write, the things that interest me, as part of post status, because e-commerce is a part of the WordPress community now. So that's kind of what I decided there. And I got interested in crypto this year. I've had my eyes on it for a long time, but I finally decided to invest a little bit. And I've invested in stocks since I was 15 years old. So I was drawn to the technical analysis from a stock perspective, or like charting and all that kind of stuff. But I was also drawn to what crypto is in general. The open source nature really aligns with what I understand in the WordPress community. A lot of the fundamentals of how that community works are really interesting. There's a lot of baggage there too, though. Like it's just a fascinating community. So I created a Twitter account. Is really all I did at first. And I did that because I was slowly following too many crypto people in my regular account that it was like getting confusing. I couldn't keep track of things. So I created a crypto Twitter account and just started this whole thing again with zero name ID. And it was really fun trying to do it again. I'm checking now. And I joined in August when my son was born, and I was holding an infant for weeks, several weeks, and just on my phone, because you're holding a sleeping infant. So it started in August of this year, and I've almost got 3,000 followers on that account now, going from zero. Like no one knew anything about me. So like getting those first few followers is super weird. Like those are bots. But pretty quickly, just because of following someone, giving an occasional reply, and then like maybe they dig into your profile and see like, oh, well, they posted a chart about this crypto, or they posted a thought that I think is funny. And like there are nice people out there that do have a bigger audience and a bigger net or whatever, and they follow you, and then they'll retweet you every now and then it creates this escalating thing. So
how much time are you spending on Twitter to build this up? Is it like you don't
have to spend a ton. I mean, really, if you spend too much, which especially during my son's leave when I wasn't working as much, I'd probably spent too much. But a couple tweets a day is probably all most people really want to hear from you. When I get excited about something, sometimes I dig in too hard. I'd say that's my flaw. So like it could be a lot more than 2 tweets a day, because I'm just like looking at these charts while I'm on my phone, and you're digging into something for the first time, you're learning all about it. So digging in where no one has any idea who I am, and like trying to get to know these people, find out if it's a community I want to be involved in is a really important component of that. I'm not certain yet. I don't know. There's a lot of nasty stuff in the crypto world, but there's a lot of great stuff too. So it's been really fun trying to do it all over again, and trying to put some of these ideas that I was just expressing to you into practice. Because a lot of what I hear, is like, and this is annoying because everybody starts from zero, but you kind of hear like, oh, well, you can do anything or sell anything because you've got like 1,000 people following you, or 10,000 or 100,000. Like there's this enormous scale of this complaint. But you just start from zero and you start sharing. And I've been able to prove that over again because I'm a small fish in the crypto pond.
Right.
But I'm starting to find a community of people that I can chat with and get to know, and people I admire or can learn from, and then in return try to provide value myself and see if there's something I can bring from my own experiences. And for me, in that space, it's about open source software community dynamics. It's about the perspective of trading traditional stocks and bringing that information to crypto, because some of these people are like, they know nothing about trading an asset.
Right.
They just like, whoa, Bitcoin's awesome, I want to buy it, and they buy it way up here, like whatever. So it's really interesting, and it's an interesting community, and it's interesting. It's been fascinating to start this all over again while not sharing it at all with my traditional network.
Yeah.
So maybe someday I'll do that.
Are you still concentrated mostly on Twitter, or have you started a blog, podcast in that space?
I've written a few blog posts now, which has been interesting. And I've seen just in a very small number of blog posts, I've been able to find out what that community is interested in and what they're not interested in.
Yeah.
And I've been able to decipher, if I do go further with this, how I might organize some of that content. Because sometimes like stuff that's not popular socially, like you tweet about it, it's not going to get like 1 million retweets because it's more fundamental. It's like, what is Bitcoin? Like a bunch of Bitcoin people don't care.
Right.
But a brand new person to your site, that might be something you could package up and put into a crypto 101 email course for new subscribers. Like maybe it's valuable there. But what people have liked is when I did a post that was pretty long, but it was an analysis of a cryptocurrency that was performing very well. So I did an analysis from a fundamental perspective and like a pricing technical perspective, and like it went just crazy, and got the attention of some influential people in that space. So
why do you think that one took off? Did you do any promotion, like beyond just tweeting out the article on your account that now has 3,000 followers or however many it has now?
Well, at the time, I think it had maybe 1,000 followers or 500. I don't know. I don't know. It was probably just well timed for what I blogged about, something that was relevant at the time. And that helped. But a lot of times you just got to get lucky, like you just gotta time what you're writing well. For me, my best blog posts have typically been something where it was almost spur of the moment, and I was like, all right, I'm writing this right now. In the WordPress space, one of those was a post I wrote about pricing several years ago now. I was already doing well, I guess, in terms of like having an audience, but I had never written a post with this type of traction before. So I ended up overnight just banging out like a 3,000 word pricing blog post that then got like 50,000 views in a week or something. And it was totally just like total brain dump on pricing, because it was what I was thinking about at the time.
Right.
Like I was thinking about pricing within my agency, and I was like, how are we setting ourselves apart, and like how are we framing ourselves? And I think you can try to like create this index of here's what I'm going to cover, and here's how it's going to work, and here's how I'm going to grow. Or you can just write what you're thinking about and share what you're thinking about. I've always found that to be more successful. So like in this scenario with crypto, sure, I can do like a 10-part intro to how you do all these things with cryptocurrencies, or I can just like, here's like, why is this cryptocurrency doing this? And like, here's the thing, I just wrote about it. And like, I just dumped it all out there in about an hour, and bam, there's a few thousand page views to this thing, and I got some new people to pay attention to what I'm doing. Yeah. I've always found that kind of spur of the moment style to be better for me. I know some people that are so structured with how they write and what they write, and they do great with it. But you got to find your style and what fits for you. And for me, sometimes just like spewing out what I'm thinking about at that moment has been very beneficial.
Yeah. Ditch the content calendar and just go with your gut.
Oh, yeah. I've never run a content calendar in my life. It's terrible. I'd love to. I need to be better about that. As members of Post Status know, like sometimes it's like like all of a sudden you get several thousand words about something that I just can't get off my chest fast enough.
Right.
But then maybe I go like 2 weeks and I'm just like, nothing interesting is happening. Like I'm not excited to write right now. And if you're not excited to share something, your audience is going to pick up on that like that.
Yeah.
Whenever I've forced out some piece of content and it like wasn't really felt, like my best critics, like friends of mine that I rely on to like give me honest feedback, they're like, dude, come on. Like it's so quick. That stuff is so obvious.
Yeah. Well, as a member, I can attest to the fact that it's always worth the wait. It's always
awesome.
It's always good content.
Well, thank you.
Well, I've taken enough of your time. I thought this would be about 30 minutes. I think we're approaching an hour now, and I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts. I think I learned a lot, especially the write your blog posts as if they're a letter to a small audience or even one person. I think that's a great takeaway from this, and I wish you luck building what you've built with Post Status in a completely new market. So,
well, maybe I don't know if I'll do that for certain, but I'm exploring it. But
yeah.
Post Status is my baby, so it's gotta run well, and I'm still excited about what's going on in the WordPress space. So as long as I'm excited about it, then I'll keep doing it.
For sure. Well, thanks again, and I guess I'll talk to you again soon, I hope.
All right, Sam, thanks for having me.